Be a part of the best pro wrestling podcast today by supporting the Going In Raw Patreon. You can enjoy access to the live taping of the show, exclusive merchandise, and patron-only episodes, and so much more. Support Going In Raw today. Click the link in the description. Hey friendo, Steve here.
And Larson.
Despite their often superhuman presentation, pro wrestlers are people, Larson, like you and me, prone to mistakes. And as we know, like many other people, they sometimes run afoul of the law.
We figured if we looked at some of these moments, maybe we can learn from them, reflect on what not to do in life, or something.
Yeah, well, here are the biggest pro wrestling arrests. SYDAL, the master of the shooting star press, is no stranger to flying high or drugs.
Most notably, the man known in the WWE as Evan Bourne busted up his foot something fierce as a result of a 2012 car accident and subsequently failed a wellness test. He's remembered by many as the guy who threw Kofi Kingston and a few other wrestlers under the bus for drug use.
I wonder if Undertaker took him to wrestlers' court. That's where wrestlers who violate unwritten locker room rules have to face their peers and maybe get beat up or have poop put in their duffel bag.
And sadly, it sounds like SYDAL's promising New Japan career might now be in jeopardy. The former Airborne was headed back to Japan to perform at New Japan's Destruction pay-per-view, but was detained at Kansai International Airport after a random bag check uncovered just over 2 grams of liquid cannabis.
Arrests involving the drug in this form are still a bit new, and exact punishments haven't been solidified as much. He was arrested on September 23rd, but there's been no word yet on the extent of the fallout.
There have been a few rumors and threats of jail time. It looks like this incident might do more permanent damage, ending SYDAL's career in Japan, as it looks like he'll be banned from the country no matter the decision on the rest of the sentencing. They are really harsh on drug convictions in Japan.
Yeah, they are. The former WWE star has had a long and interesting career, showing off his skills in TNA, Ring of Honor, and Wrestling Society X on MTV, but he seems to have lapses in judgment from time to time that do massive damage to his career.
The man loves himself some weed, Steve.
I can't say I blame him. I literally sell it out of my garage. I'm joking. I'm waiting until it gets legal over here in California.
Even then, I don't think you could do that.
Start selling it over by the school over there. I'm so joking. RVD, Mr. Monday Night, Rob Van Dam, has never hid the fact that he loves him some weed. But that love of the stickiest of ickies may have cost him the ultimate prize in wrestling.
Back in 2006, the newly crowned WWE champion, not too long after winning both the WWE and ECW World Championships, had plenty of reason to celebrate with some party favors, but while driving with Sabu through Ohio, RVD was pulled over for speeding.
The cop, presumably not the big boss man, smelled weed on the whole effing show and realized the high flyer was flying high with Sabu.
Being busted with 18 grams of marijuana and 5 Vicodin brought the biggest push of his career to a stop, as Mr. Pay-Per-View had just beaten John Cena at the One Night Stand event and presumably was on track for huge things.
Yeah, so then he was forced to drop 2 of the biggest prizes in wrestling to Edge and Big Show respectively on the next set of shows, and was sent home on a 30-day suspension and never reached that level in his career again.
Superstars had been arrested before for DUIs and minor drug offenses, with little or no punishment by the WWE, but we can't think of a time when a reigning world champion was busted for drugs and punished so harshly.
Yeah, until Roman Reigns' wellness policy violation, that is, which he's still being punished for, and by punished I mean he's being pushed to the moon as the reigning US champion. Lex Luger! The Lex Express has had the brakes put on it quite a few times, having multiple run-ins with his longtime opponent, Johnny Law, but no year was worse for the former narcissist than 2003.
His most severe run-in with the Law had to be his drug arrest on May 1st of that year, which was the same day his girlfriend and former WWF talent Miss Elizabeth died.
Yeah, sadly, Elizabeth Hewlett overdosed early that morning at Luger's townhouse and was pronounced dead not long after being rushed to the hospital.
The couple were no strangers to the local authorities, though, as enforcement officers had been dispatched to the Luger house in April of that year to answer a domestic abuse call. Luger, real name Lawrence Fall, had allegedly given Elizabeth 2 black eyes and a bruise on the head. Lex would also be caught driving under the influence with a suspended license just under 2 months later.
What should have made him tap out like a victim of the torture act, though, were the 13 felony possession charges.
Luger may have gotten off a bit easy here.
Yeah, a $1,000 fine and 5 years probation seems a bit light, even for a plea deal. It's a slap on the wrist compared to what it should have gotten him in the state of Georgia.
Eventually, the former WCW World Champion did get his act together, and he has actually helped work on the WWE's current wellness policy.
So when we're reminded of all the silly rules in there, we know who to blame.
What, you don't think the wellness policy is?
The total package?
Yeah.
No. Maybe, I don't know. Steve Austin! Although we saw the Texas Rattlesnake have multiple run-ins with the law on Raw during his heyday, sadly, his real life has seen its fair share of legal problems as well.
2002 was not Stone Cold's best year. During that time, Austin was on his third marriage to WWE star Deborah, most famously remembered as the manager of Captain Slapnuts himself, Jeff Jarrett.
In June of that year, the blonde bombshell called police out to the couple's home in Texas after she had been abused by the rattlesnake, and it wasn't pretty. According to police reports, Deborah accused Austin of beating her in a variety of locations and had suffered a swollen cheek, a black eye, and bruises on her back and shoulders.
Austin pled no contest, but the incident would lead to their divorce early the next year. He was only charged $1,000 though, put on probation for a year, and forced to do 80 hours of community service.
Obviously, the WWE wasn't happy, but they had to protect their moneymaker. According to the former wife of Steve Mongo McMichael, a gag order was placed on her for any discussion about this incident and her divorce.
Austin can't talk about it legally either, at least that's what he insinuated in his book, and the few times he's been asked about it in interviews, he seems to clam up and switch the subject. But it seems the blame is put on stress or alcohol or maybe even a bit of roid rage, depending on who you ask.
Fortunately, Stone Cold has kept his nose clean since this incident and seems to have mellowed out now that he's away from the business, only opening up audio cans of whoop ass.
It's kind of a tacky joke, Steve.
Yeah, a little bit. A little bit tacky. Sorry. Sonny! Ooh, this is going to be messy and kind of gross.
Sonny, aka Tammy Sytch, was best known for a time in the WWE as the blonde bombshell manager of multiple acts and the sex symbol for a generation of wrestlers.
And since she's wrapped up her wrestling career, she's become known for making me cringe every time her name pops up online, either because she's been arrested again or there's more stories about her new career diddling herself for paying fans on Skype.
Like the New Day and the tag team titles, Sonny seems interested in breaking some records of her own. For example, in 2012, Sonny found herself being arrested 5 times in a single month for various crimes.
And 3 of those times were in 3 consecutive days. It was all tied to her harassing her boyfriend, even strangling him at one point.
It'd take too long to talk about all the different things she has been arrested for, but needless to say that Sytch has been charged with everything from breaking and entering and DUI to violating a slew of different court orders.
Yeah, she was arrested as recently as last month for parole violation.
The Hall of Famer goes into her side of events more in her book of Stars Shattered, The Rise and Fall, and Rise of Wrestling Diva Tammy Sonny Sytch, released this year.
Shouldn't there be another fall at the end of that rise?
Seems like it.
Yeah, she also goes into her side of things in her documentary feature movie, Sunny Side Up, In Through the Back Door. I'm joking, that's just her gross pornography. I'd have more sympathy if she didn't come off as kind of an asshole on Twitter.
Yeah, she seems like a real asshole.
All sorts of racist shit on there, man. Scott Hall! The bad guy is such a fascinating figure in so many respects. Hearing him talk about a moment in his life where he was forced to kill a guy in self-defense, a subject he discussed on Steve Austin's podcast, is really compelling stuff.
The incident in question happened way back before his wrestling career, when Hall was 25 and working at a strip club.
There was some sort of altercation over a girl, which led to Hall and some guy getting into a fight.
The scuffle led to the man drawing a gun on Hall, who was able to fend the guy off, shooting him dead in the process.
Hall was then arrested and charged with second-degree murder.
The bad guy saw the charges dismissed, though, due to the evidence against him being deemed insufficient.
Hall has said the events of that night had a profound effect on his life, most notably with his well-documented issues with addiction.
Drug and alcohol abuse became regular practice, and long after he was finished with WWE and WCW, the former Diamond Stud was still on a self-destructive path.
He was arrested several more times for disorderly mischief, criminal conduct, and driving under the influence, among other infractions.
He was also suicidal and had some very public low points in recent years. His last arrest was for domestic violence in 2012.
The WWE and Diamond Dallas Page have helped Hall on the path to recovery. He actually holds the dubious honor of being the superstar that the company has paid out the most for their health treatment, which is past the 6-figure mark at this point.
Thankfully, time in the accountability crib has done wonders for Hall, who, with the exception of a few public trips off the wagon, seems to be staying on the straight and narrow.
Now, the worst thing Hall seems to do is hit on younger female wrestlers awkwardly on Twitter. It's kind of great because he's one of the many old-timers who have no idea what a DM is. My favorite was Vader, when somebody was she was like, hey, DM me. And he was like, I'd love to DM you. What does that mean? It's Vader time to learn some technology jargon. New Jack! One of ECW's toughest competitors is known for his insane high-risk spots and being super stiff in the ring. but there's a line between stiff worker and why are you doing that to him that he's crossed on several occasions.
Jerome Young, also known as New Jack, has amassed quite the rap sheet, and his history of violence has had a few interesting detours.
But the incident we're going to look at today took place in 1996 and involves a wrestler who called himself Mass Transit, a 17-year-old who lied to Paul Heyman about not just his age, but his training as well.
He told Paul Lee that he was trained by Killer Kowalski. He wasn't.
No, when Axl Rotten couldn't make an ECW house show in November of that year in Revere, Massachusetts, Mass Transit, real name Eric Koulis, convinced Heyman to put him in the match against the Gangstas, where he would team up with Devon Dudley.
Having never bladed before, Koulis picked literally the worst person to ask for help with it, New Jack, who did so with so much enthusiasm, severing two of the teenager's arteries.
There's amateur video of the incident online. We're sure as shit not showing it here. And the amount of blood loss is shocking. The kid passed out, and the most disturbing aspect of the video was that he could hear his dad screaming for the bell to be rung. It is heartbreaking.
The Gangstas continued to work him over though, finishing what they started, and to top it off, New Jack grabbed the mic and said that he didn't care if the kid died, among other things.
A few years later, Jerome Young was charged with aggravated assault for the incident, but was acquitted. Koulis' father would also sue ECW and New Jack specifically for damages, not happy his son had to get 50 stitches, but lost that case because the kid had lied about his age.
Sadly, Eric Koulis died in 2002 from complications from gastric bypass surgery, which the father would claim was due to eating disorders and depression, based off what happened to his son at the hands of New Jack.
This simply led to another unsuccessful lawsuit, though. The lesson here, kids, is not to lie about shit like that, and don't ask anyone you don't know to blade you.
Especially New Jack.
Mostly New Jack. I would say probably top of the list of people you don't want to blade you. New Jack. Jimmy Superfly Snuka! Jimmy Snuka rose to prominence in the 80s thanks to some incredible high-flying performances, most memorably when he flew off the top of a cage at Madison Square Garden in 1982.
But there was a darker side to Snuka's career in the form of the 1983 death of his then-girlfriend, Nancy Argentino.
The acrobatic grappler came back to his hotel room from some TV tapings and found her unresponsive, or so he claimed at the time.
The EMTs found her in a state which indicated head trauma and possible shock, and Argentino died at the hospital just hours later. The subsequent autopsy ruled the death should be looked at as a possible homicide, and the police had one suspect, Snuka.
Snuka's story kept changing, but whatever he said was enough to keep him out of jail, regardless of the autopsy evidence. They just didn't have enough to pin Argentino's death on Snuka. But that didn't keep him from being sued by the family for $500,000.
There's no telling how much Snuka being a big star at the time affected the case, but the family was convinced it played a part, and Vince came to his defense publicly as well.
Now, 32 years later, Jimmy is a Hall of Famer and wrote a book, one that had a few statements that convinced the family and the district attorney to re-examine the case. He was arrested and charged with third-degree murder, along with a new theory about what actually occurred that night.
A judge did recently rule that Snuka is not mentally competent enough to stand trial, but this isn't the end just yet, as there will be a re-evaluation in the near future. WWE did end his Legends contract, though, and moved him out of the Hall of Fame.
He might be moving into a new home very shortly. And by that I mean prison.
Yeah.
Jose Gonzalez! The year was 1988 in Puerto Rico, and several talents had gathered for a show. But no one there could have possibly known what they would be witness to that night. The murder of Bruiser Brody.
Jose Gonzalez, known as Invader, asked Brody, real name Frank Goodish, to talk in the showers of the locker room, a common practice for shows like that in preparation for the night of matches.
Most accounts claim that Gonzalez came in with a towel concealing a knife and waited for Brody to turn and proceeded to cut the massive wrestler across the stomach, spilling his guts, and then stabbed him in the heart.
What Brody actually died from, though, was a loss of blood during the second surgery doctors performed on him that night, but it didn't help that he waited on the shower floor far too long for an ambulance, between 30 minutes and an hour, depending on the account.
Gonzalez was arrested for murder, but the actual trial was a joke, and as a result, Invader walked free.
Athletes like Dutch Mantel and Tony Atlas allegedly received their subpoenas for the trial a day after the verdict was already in. Gonzalez claimed self-defense and was seen as a local star in Puerto Rico, which obviously played a factor in his acquittal.
Few people know exactly why it happened, but the belief is it could have been over money, the promotion, he bought a controlling portion of it, Brody not wanting to work with others, or a past beef after a beating Brody gave Invader in a match from 1976. It doesn't help that different accounts of the events don't all match up.
Although the murder occurred years ago, the event was a huge one in wrestling history, so much so that Carlos Colon, a famous Puerto Rican wrestler turned booker, announced a 2013 storyline where he would come out of retirement to get justice against Invader for something he did 25 years ago.
Which is beyond disgusting, but that's just pro wrestling sometimes.
Yeah, that's really gross. That's a gross storyline.
It's really nasty. Vince McMahon! Vince McMahon is obviously no stranger to controversy, but there was a time that a trial almost brought him and his behemoth wrestling company crumbling down.
Back in 1993, Vince was indicted for distributing anabolic steroids to his athletes, which led to a trial that brought the WWF to its knees. It should be stated he was indicted, but not technically arrested. Still, he faced big prison time. Considering how huge of an impact this case could have had on the wrestling landscape, it's here at number 1.
This all stemmed from the company's personal candy doctor in Pennsylvania, Dr. George Sahorian, going to trial after he sold $650 worth of steroids to a federal informant and was caught trying to shred the evidence.
Steroid regulation had tightened up in 1988, and the courts came down on the doctor for hooking up WWF superstars from 1984 to 1989. There are other accounts that indicate this actually continued with Sahorian up until 1991, and even longer with other doctors.
Multiple wrestlers were called to the stand to testify, including Rowdy Roddy Piper, IRS, and Hulk Hogan, but only one wrestler actually spoke against McMahon, Nails, who the defense passed off as having a long-standing grudge, a former employee simply seeking revenge.
Vince was facing up to 8 or more years in prison, but the trial was a complete mess. There was evidence that pointed fingers at a number of WWF officials participating in this and possibly even helping to cover it up, including Linda McMahon and Pat Patterson, but a loss of evidence, potentially due to the McMahons and the doctor being tipped off, and the testimony of Hulk Hogan made sure Vince was acquitted. Hogan claimed that his drug use was all his own idea, and there was no chance in hell that McMahon made him do anything.
It was all me, brother. Since then, many other wrestlers have come forward or spoken about the situation, and if they are to be believed, it looks like Vince got off easy with this one in a case that could have crippled the company.
During the trial, Vince actually transferred control of the company over to his wife Linda as a precautionary move and made arrangements for a smooth transition of power should he be sent up to the big house, with Jerry Jarrett taking the reins should that happen. How different would things have been had Vince been sent to prison, Steve?
I imagine we'd have had like 10 years of Jeff Jarrett as our WWF World Champion.
Which 10 years?
From day one that Vince was in the big house to the day that he got out, be all Jeff Jarrett. Anyways, those are the 10 biggest pro wrestling arrests we could think of. If you guys have any comments, then leave them in the comments.
And yesterday we did a video on the biggest lawsuits.
In pro wrestling, yeah.
Yeah, watch that too, please.
Check that out, yeah. Just don't sue us for anything we said in these videos. Because we have a writer, Stephen Wild, sue him. We're just reading his words.
To the big house.
Go Scoops.